The study of ancient Indian history is important for several reasons. It tells us how, when, and where people developed the earliest cultures in India and how they began undertaking agriculture and stock raising, which made life secure and settled. It shows how the ancient Indians discovered and utilized natural resources and how they created the means for their livelihood. We get an idea of how the ancient inhabitants made arrangements for food, shelter, and transport, and learn how they took to farming, spinning, weaving, metalworking, and the like, how they cleared forests, founded villages, cities, and eventually large kingdoms. Now we'll talk about material remains. The methods of archaeology help us to recover the material remains of the past relating to ancient, medieval, and modern periods of our past history. In India and many other countries, archaeology is used to study prehistory and ancient history. Prehistory is considered with the period for which there are no written sources, and history is basically based on written material. Prehistoric sites differ from historical sites in several respects. Generally, they are not in the form of prominent habitation remains, but principally of fossils of humans, plants, and animals. They are found on the hill slopes of plateaus and mountains, and on the banks of nearby rivers with terraces, and comprise sundry fauna and flora. More importantly, numerous stone tools from the Stone Age have been found at these sites. The remains of tools, plants, animals, and humans from the pre-Ice Age indicate the climatic conditions that prevailed at the time. Although writing was known in India by the middle of the 3rd millennium BC in the Indus culture, it has not so far been deciphered. Thus, though the Harappans knew how to write, their culture is placed in the proto-historic phase. The same is the case with the Chalcolithic or Copper Stone Age cultures, which had no writing. Decipherable writing was known in India only in the 3rd century BC, with the Ashokan inscriptions providing solid evidence for historical reconstruction from that time. However, despite the critical use of Vedic and post-Vedic literary sources for history in pre-Ashokan times, archaeology remains a very important source for historians. The ancient Indians left innumerable material remains. The stone temples in South India and the brick monasteries in eastern India still stand to remind us of the great building activities of the past. However, the major part of these remains lies buried in mounds scattered all over India. It may be of different types: single culture, major culture, and multiculture. Single culture mounds represent only one culture throughout. Some mounds represent only the painted graveware PGW culture, others Satavahana culture, and yet others that of the Kushans. In major culture mounds, one culture is dominant and the others are of secondary importance. Multicultural mounds represent several important cultures in succession which occasionally overlap with one another. As is the case with the Ramayana and Mahabharata, an excavated mound can be used to understand successive layers of the material and other aspects of a culture. A mound can be excavated vertically or horizontally. Vertical excavation means lengthwise digging to uncover the period-wise sequence of cultures. It is generally confined to a part of the site. Horizontal excavation entails digging the mound as a whole or a major part of it. The method may enable an excavator to obtain a complete idea of the site culture in a particular period. As most sites have been dug vertically, they provide a good chronological sequences of material culture. Horizontal diggings, being very expensive, are very few in number, with the result that the excavations do not give us a full or even adequate picture of material life in many phases of ancient Indian history. Even in those mounds which have been excavated, the ancient remains have been preserved in varying proportions. In the dry, arid climate of western Uttar Pradesh, Rajasthan, and northern western India, antiquities are found in a better state of preservation. But in the moist and humid climate of the mid-Gangetic plains and in the deltaic regions, even iron implements suffered corrosions and mud structures become difficult to detect. Only the burnt brick structures or stone structures of the Gangetic plains are well preserved. Excavations have brought to light the villages that people established around 6000 BC in Baluchistan. They also tell us about the material culture which was developed in the Gangetic plains in the 2nd millennium BC. They show the layout of the settlements in which people lived, the types of pottery they used, the form of house in which they dwelt, the kind of cereals they ate, and the type of tools and implements they used. Some people in South India buried in graves along with the dead their tools, weapons, pottery, and other belongings, and these were encircled by large pieces of stone. These structures are called megaliths, although some megaliths do not fall in this category. By digging them, we learn of the life people lived in the Deccan from the Iron Age onwards. The science that enables us to systematically dig the successive layers of old mounds and to form an idea of the material life of the people is called archaeology. Their dates are fixed by various methods. Of them, radiocarbon dating is the most important. Radiocarbon or carbon-14, C14, is a radioactive carbon isotope which is present in all living objects. The history of climate and vegetation is known through an examination of plant residues and especially through pollen analysis. On this basis, it is suggested that agriculture was practiced in Rajasthan and Kashmir around 7000 to 6000 BC. The nature and components of metal artifacts are analyzed scientifically, and consequently the mines from which the metals were obtained are located and the stages in the development of metal technology identified. An examination of animal bones shows whether the animals were domesticated and also indicates the uses to which they were put. And the archaeology provides a kind of soil archive which contains various material remains. However, for a total study of prehistory extending roughly up to 3000 BC or so, it is necessary to get an idea of the history of the soil, rocks, etc. This is provided by geological studies. Similarly, the world of plants and animals keeps on changing, though at a slow pace. Their history is provided by biological studies. Human history cannot be understood without an idea of the continuing interaction between soils, plants, and animals on the one hand and humans on the other. Geological and biological advances enable us to understand not only prehistory but also history. Taken together with archaeological remains, geological and biological studies act as important sources for the study of over 98% of the total time scale of history, starting with the origin of the earth. Now we will continue part of our sources, coins. Although a large number of coins and inscriptions have been found on the surface, many of them have been unearthed by digging. The study of coins is called numismatics. Ancient Indian currency was not issued in the form of paper, as is the case nowadays, but as metal coins. Ancient coins were made of metal, copper, silver, gold, and lead. Coin molds made of burnt clay have been discovered in large numbers. Most of them relate to the Kushan period, that is, the first 3 Christian centuries. The use of such molds in the pre-Gupta period virtually disappeared. As there was nothing like the modern banking system in ancient times, people stored money in earthenware and also in brass vessels and maintained them as precious hoards on which they could fall back in time of need. Many of these hoards, containing not only Indian coins but also those minted abroad, such as in the Roman Empire, have been discovered in different parts of India. They are preserved mostly in museums in Kolkata, Patna, Lucknow, Delhi, Jaipur, Mumbai, and Chennai. There are many Indian coins in the museums of Nepal, Bangladesh, Pakistan, and Afghanistan. As Britain ruled over India for a long time, British officials succeeded in transferring many of the Indian coins to private and public collections in Britain. Coins of the major dynasties have been catalogued and published. We have catalogues of the coins in the Indian Museum at Kolkata, of Indian coins in the British Museum in London, and so on. Nonetheless, there are a large number of coins that have yet to be catalogued by and published. Our earliest coins contain a few symbols, but the later coins depict the figures of kings and divinities and also mention their names and dates. The areas where they are found indicate the region of their circulation. This has enabled us to reconstruct the history of several ruling dynasties, especially of the Indo-Greeks, who came to India from North Afghanistan and ruled here in the 2nd and 1st centuries BC. As coins were used for various purposes such as donations, a mode of payment, and a medium of exchange, they throw considerable light on economic history. Some coins were issued by guilds of merchants and goldsmiths with the permission of the rulers. This shows that crafts and commerce had become important. Coins helped transactions on a large scale and contributed to trade. The largest number of Indian coins date to the post-Maurya period. These were made of lead, platinum, copper, bronze, silver and gold. The Guptas issued the largest number of gold coins. All this indicates that trade and commerce flourished, especially in post-Maurya and a good part of the Gupta period. However, only a few coins belonging to the post-Gupta period have been found, which indicates a decline of trade and commerce in that period. Coins also portray kings and gods and contain religious symbols and legends, all of which throw light on the art and religion of the time. Hope you liked this content and will continue further sources for constructing the history in our next episode. Thank you.